All right, let's jump right in. Today we're talking about a thinker who truly shook things up in 20th century Korea, Ham Seok-heon. This guy was a historian, an activist, a Quaker, and he looked at the version of Christianity being taught and thought, nope, this isn't going to work for a country that's suffering like mine is. So what did he do? He basically decided to rebuild it from the inside out.
And this was the question that was at the heart of everything for Ham Seok-heon. You see, for him, faith couldn't just be some abstract idea you think about on a Sunday. No way. It had to get its hands dirty. It had to face the brutal, everyday reality of the Japanese occupation and the pain of his people. A distant God just wasn't going to cut it. And this one question, it would light the fuse for a whole new way of thinking. So, to really get a handle on Ham's pretty radical ideas, you first have to understand the world that created him. This wasn't a faith born in a quiet library. It was forged in the fire of a national emergency. Ham was born right at the beginning of a century that was going to bring unbelievable hardship to Korea. His entire life was colored by this. Now, a huge turning point for him was in 1921. He meets his teacher, Yoo Young-mo, also known as Daseok, and this man would totally change the way he saw the world. By the 1930s, Ham is already a key voice, writing for this really important journal, Bible Joseon. But here's the interesting part. Ham didn't start out as some kind of rebel. Not at all. His early faith was pretty standard, He believed in what theologians call substitutionary redemption, the idea that Jesus died for you, taking on a spiritual debt that you could never pay back yourself. But for a guy living in a nation that felt like it was under siege, that idea, well, it was starting to feel a little hollow.
And this is where the story really takes a turn. The quiet follower starts to become a rebel. He goes through this massive crisis of faith, but instead of leading to despair, it gives birth to an incredibly powerful new idea.
Ham looked around and saw the established church just seemed passive. It wasn't really engaging with the suffering that was right there on the street. He started to see the story of Jesus less as a historical event and more like a mirror reflecting Korea's own destiny. A faith that just asks you to look back at a cross from 2,000 years ago, it felt empty. He knew faith had to be lived, right here, right now. So this led Ham to a fundamental split in his thinking. He turned away from the traditional idea of Daseok, or substitutionary redemption, where Jesus does all the heavy lifting for you. And instead, he put forward this radical alternative, Daseok, or self-redemption. Now, this doesn't mean you save yourself without God, not at all. It means you actively join in the process by carrying your own cross, by taking on suffering with purpose as an act of faith. This one idea just changes everything. It turns faith from something you passively believe into something you actively do. It's the difference between being a spectator in the stands and a player on the field. For him, everyone was being called to get on the field and become a character in this epic, ongoing story of redemption. Okay, so this idea of self-redemption pushed Ham toward an even bigger, more universal concept. It's the idea that would define his life's work, and he called it Tteut. And this right here shows you the massive leap his thinking took. Ham once wrote a book called Korean History Seen Through the Bible. Years later, he changed the title to Korean History Seen Through Tteut. That one little word change, it tells you everything. He was moving away from seeing the world through the lens of one single book and towards seeing that book as just one expression of a much bigger universal truth. So what is Tteut? It's a bit hard to translate perfectly, but think of it as the divine will, the deep underlying purpose that is pushing history forward. Ham believed this will wasn't just Christian. It was the core truth that all religions are trying to get at. And this is the crucial part, you don't find Tteut when things are easy. It reveals itself right in the middle of struggle and suffering. And if you follow that logic, you end up here. If truth is universal, then no single religion can have a monopoly on it. Ham came to believe that all the world's great faiths, Christianity, Buddhism, Confucianism, you name it, were really just different trails leading up the same mountain. The language is different, the rituals are different, but the ultimate truth they're all reaching for, it's the same. Okay, so if Tteut is this universal force driving history, and Daseok is the act of carrying your own cross, then who's supposed to do all this work? Well, Ham had a special name for them, the Ssi-al. Ssi-al literally translates to seed. And this isn't just a poetic nickname for the common folk. Think about it. A seed is all about potential. It isn't a flower yet, but everything it needs to become one is packed inside. For Ham,
The Ssi-al were the ordinary people who held the incredible potential to make Tteut real in the world. They weren't just helpless victims of history, they were its main characters, but only if they chose to unlock that potential by embracing their suffering with a sense of purpose.
So Han basically lays out this roadmap for how to become a true essential. Step 1, you have to look your history and your suffering square in the face, no flinching. Step 2, you choose Daseok, self-redemption. You pick up your own burden. Then you start to actually become an expression of Tteut in how you live. And the final step, you go from being an object that history happens to being a co-creator, an agent actively pushing the world forward. So where does Jesus fit into all this? Did Ham just cast him aside? Absolutely not. He gave him the highest possible honor in his entire system. For him, Jesus was the essential of essential, the ultimate seed, the perfect example. He wasn't a substitute who saved us from our suffering. He was the one who showed all of humanity how to transform suffering into redemption. He's not the great exception. He's the great model for every other essential to follow.
So let's pull all these threads together. What Hammond ended up creating wasn't just a new kind of Korean Christianity. It was a theology that could speak to the whole world, all of it built on this foundation of just radical inclusivity. When you look at it, Ham's thinking offers a way through some of the deepest problems we still face. He helps us move past toxic nationalism by reframing a nation's pain not as a curse, but as a crucible for purifying the whole world. He gets us past religious exclusivism by finding that universal Tteut in every faith. And he pulls us beyond a passive, disconnected faith by demanding that we actively participate. And this leads to his most provocative and maybe most challenging conclusion. Ham argued that to truly get beyond us versus them thinking, to become truly denationalist, you first had to become de-Christianized. And what he meant by that was you had to let go of the idea that your religion is the one and only way. For him, religious tribalism and political tribalism were two sides of the same coin. To serve true world peace, you had to let go of both. And so all of this leaves us with a pretty profound question for our own time. Ham Seok-heon built an entire philosophy on this powerful idea that suffering, if we face it with purpose, isn't just a negative thing. It's a tool for growth. It can be the engine of history. So when we look at the struggles our world is facing right now, the question he would ask us is this. What is the universal will? What is the deep truth, the Tteut, that all this suffering is trying to teach us? What cross is our world being asked to carry today?